Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Radina Merasati. I'm from PBA. I would like to answer about Psycholinguistic final exam. Number 1, the 5 components that must exist in language teaching are: A. Policies and objectives. These components relate to the question of where is it going, language learning. The direction of language learning is chosen and determined by society and government. For example, language is designated as a language national. State or foreign language, it is these policies and objectives that determine the position of Indonesian as the national language in Indonesia, so that the language must be taught starting from the lowest level of education to the highest level of education, college. Language learning policies are formulated in the functions and objectives of learning Indonesian, where the function of Indonesian language and literature subject refers as a means of national unity and unity. Then the goal is for students to appreciate and be proud of Indonesian as the national language and the language of the state, understand and be able to ask Indonesian to improve intellectual abilities, emotional maturity, and social maturity. B. Material. These components relate to what questions are given to the learner in the learning process. This component is related to the design component, curriculum, and development of teaching materials. Curriculum design usually discusses elements of selection and gradation of materials. In the role of education, there are changed and relatively fast curriculum developments in the future. This is due to this development of science and technology, especially also due to the development of professional views on the function of language, which are increasingly the longer it feels more important and broader. For example, the tendency shift from a curriculum based on linguistic aspect to situation-based curriculum, and finally on a curriculum that based on aspect of knowledge and semantic. Psycholinguistically caused by strengthening of semantic acquisition theory and language learning. C. Methodology. This component is related to the questions of how to carry out learning, and according to strivings to carry out learning, it is necessary to pay attention to the components of selecting the relevant type of teaching approach and pedagogy methodology. Teaching in the classroom. When choosing a relevant type of teaching, there are several factors that the teacher must consider, namely: number 1, the age of the learner, teenagers and adults; number 2, language mastery stage, beginner, intermediate; number 3, educational goals, general education, practical mastery, special vocational; number 4, learner involvement, voluntary and forced; number 5, the status of the language of instruction, mother tongue, target language, other foreign language; and number 6, target language status, second language and foreign language. The language learning approach is an agreement on a view about a particular language or a language teaching. For example, the communicative process, the principle that language teaching must allow the transformation of communicative competencies consisting of grammatical, discursive, strategic, and sociolinguistic competencies in language learning. Then pedagogy determines how to present teaching materials given to students, how teachers use various techniques, systems, and teaching process. D. Human. This factor relates to the question who is involved in learning. According to Pro, that the human factor consists of learners and teachers, while, according to Strevens, divides the human component into components of teacher and learner education, where teacher education either in service training or on service training is an important factor. because the teacher must have the skills, information, and theory. Skills include mastery of the language being taught, teaching techniques, and classroom activities, including learning management and evaluation. The information needed by the teacher includes information about education, curriculum to be followed by teachers, materials, as well as about the nature of language. The theory needed by language teacher is philosophy education, psychology, linguistic, applied linguistics, language learning strategies, language learning strategies student, and so on. The information needed by the teacher includes information about education, the curriculum to be followed by the teacher, materials, and about the nature of language. The theory needed by language teacher is philosophy, education, psychology, linguistic, applied linguistics, language learning strategies, student, and so on. And furthermore, learners have the potential to learn a language, and in essence, each learner has difference between learners with one another. As a teacher, it's necessary to understand this difference in order to help learners solve complex problems faced during the learning process. Evaluation. Evaluation is an element that has various benefits, namely, number one, to provide very important feedback on the assessment of the learning process, progress of changing conditions, and to keep all informed parties involved in the teaching and learning process, namely the learner, teachers, and other parties who participate in assessing in the level of success the process. And number two, for the purpose of the administration of the institution organizer of the teaching process, selection for educational purpose, advance, granting a diploma or certificate. Number two, the contribution of psycholinguistic to the development of the natural method can be seen in functional linguistic theory, monitor crescents, language learning hypothesis, brain plasticity hypothesis, acculturation theory, and mentalist psychology, where learning is done consequently and is the result of a formal learning situation. According to this hypothesis, young children only make acquisition in an attempt to master their first language. However, adults do two ways in developing their B2 competencies. The first way is the acquisition that he does as a small child develops his first language skill. The second way is done by learning the language. An example of the application of this method can be done with techniques developed by teachers that provoke learners to develop acquisition activities, not learning. These activities, for example, number one, affective humanistic, are number two are problem solving, number three are in the form of game, and number four are problem oriented. Humanistic affective activity developed to involve feelings, opinions, desires, reactions, ideas from students. While problem solving is developed so that the student can find the correct situational answer, the form of the game cannot be considered a fact or a distraction but must be well planned so that support acquisition. Content-oriented activities emphasize the subject material that is needed by students. The contribution of psycholinguistic to the development of the total physical response method is a language teaching method that is built based on the coordination of practical action, and this method is in the form language teaching through physical activities or movement, where language is taught by activating whole body movement. This approach is adopted by science, developmental psychology, and learning theory. An example of the application of this method can be seen from the technique that has been carried out by Asser to teach the abstract word government, justice, and salary. A blast card is made, abstract vocabulary is written on the card with the appropriate letter. Then on the back of the card, given the meaning of the word in the form of translation. So in this method, the teacher plays the role of an active director. It is the teacher who decides what to teach. He is the model and presents the new subject matter, and he is the one who chooses the supporting materials to us in the classroom. Number 3, on the contribution on the contribution of psycholinguistic to language skills. The contribution is discussed the theory of understanding, where this theory is divided into two, namely the synthetic approach and the semantic approach. The synthetic approach is carried out by recognizing the sounds, words, and forms contained in the sentence to capture the meaning of the statement contained in the sentence, while the semantic approach is carried out by providing an interpretation of the meaning of the received sentence statements based on context, facts, and function, and then identifying the sounds, words, and function constituents that supports that interpretation. Selecting listening theory is a theory that is useful in teaching speaking and listening in an integrated manner. Speech production theory is a theory which states that language production involves two main activities, namely planning and implementation in speaking. For example, a speaker first plans how he speaks to influence the listener's mentality. Then it does so by removing segments of sound, words, phrase, and sentence. Denial theory is a special form of statement. Denial-like supposition with its annulment is a unity. Denial ignores all information and affirms new information. For example, remember yesterday when I told you it was John who hit Bill? Alright, I was wrong. In the second sentence, there is a statement that it was John who hit Bill is not true. So what do you want to cancel? Did John do something but not hit Bill? Did John hit someone but not hit Bill? Did something happen but not Bill's beating by John? The ambiguity theory is divided into two, namely the garden path theory and the many meanings theory. The garden path theory states that humans do not perceive a sentence as ambiguous because there is only one interpretation of it, while the many meanings theory states that its listeners make two or more different interpretations for each sentence. Ambiguous and immediately decide which one is correct based on context. For example, when carrying a meeting and the meeting there are opinions that are difficult to reconcile, meeting leader will be better off using the ambiguous sentence. We consider your opinion. Will this opinion be used? Distinctive features theory. This theory states whether its sound has a number of features as a distinguishing feature, whether they are consonantal, vocal, anterior, coronal, voice, nasal, strident, and continuant. For example, sound F and P, sound S and Sh. The teacher will be able to teach that sound by using the sound distinguishing feature. Continuity theory states that mastery of language segment directly related to the segment of the language that has been mastered. For example, students are assigned to observe and record the sentence used by speakers in communication even with certain sounds. Sentences that have been obtained are then sorted based on the number of clues, and the results are reported in writing for further use as material for classification. Thank you for your attention, Miss. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.